Listen, I'm just gonna say it. The Boys is one of the greatest TV shows of this generation, there's no doubt about it, and we think it made the mature decision to adapt the story to fit the current landscape of the world because it's become one of the greatest commentary pieces of the modern era. But that doesn't mean that it did everything that was shown in the comics accurately. In fact, much of what happened in Garth Ennis's original work didn't exactly make it into the series, and we're here to talk about the 10 major differences between his version of The Boys and Amazon's. So, here are the biggest differences between The Boys Season 5, Episodes 1 and 2, and the comics explained. Let's get into it.
Who says I want to change?
Sam Butcher's death. Season 5 began with a scene that would really set a tone. There was a scene early on in Episode 1 between Butcher and his dad, and to call it disturbing would be an understatement. Butcher knew that his mom Carol had passed away. In fact, he made a stop at the cemetery to see her and his brother Lenny. He came to see his dad to finish the job that cancer couldn't, and we're grateful that the showrunners didn't fully depict that scene. It must have been graphic to say the least, and the way Butcher was acting was absolutely bone-chilling. Butcher and his dad both knew that he was there to kill him, and we didn't think that watching Sam Butcher essentially begging for his life would make us feel anything, but we'd be lying if we said we didn't. And the beauty of it all is that this isn't what goes down in the comics. Nope. In the books, Butcher visits the cemetery to see all of his family, and he pisses on his father's grave to illustrate his hatred. The comics made it a point to impress upon us that Butcher was his father's son, as did the show, but it didn't have the emotional depth that the show did. In the comics, Sam Butcher was used as more of a punchline than anything, and that's why the show's depiction of their final scene together hits so much harder. It was a portrayal of a man who truly had nothing to lose, because even when they met in previous seasons, Butcher stopped short of killing the guy. Now, he's taken the gloves off and thrown them into the abyss, and Sam Butcher's murder was just the first of many this season. The Freedom Camps. The battle between the Starlighters and the Homelanders is a show-exclusive creation because Garth Ennis's The Boys was more about covert shady dealings and corporate maneuvers that never made it to the front page. In the show, the resistance is real, and Starlight has been blamed for all sorts of things, like the murder of Godolkin University students, which was actually on Thomas Godolkin, and cannibalizing children, which was a clever nod to the original Black Noir's deeds in the comics. But the one thing that even Ennis stopped short of emulating was Nazi concentration camps, which Eric Kripke and his team clearly didn't do. Vought's freedom camps are a mockery of the word freedom, and it really shows in the way they treat their detainees. People are forced to watch Vought propaganda films and eat Vought-a-burger, all while waiting for Love Sausage to beat them up with his prehensile member, or for Cindy to blow them apart for trying to escape. We'll get to Love Sausage in a bit, don't you worry, but the general concept of the freedom camps and the fact that they even exist is a complete departure from the source material, where no such thing exists over there. The Boys' resistance to the Seven's reign of terror occurs in complete public silence, and it only becomes a public matter towards the very end of the series. Homelander's tactless approach to dealing with things is on full display with these camps, and that will only become more and more evident as Season 5 progresses. A-Train's comic inaccurate ending. One of the best things about the show has been the redemption of Reggie Franklin, aka A-Train. In the comics, A-Train was essentially a shock jock who never regretted a single thing he'd done in his miserable life. He met an end that was befitting his depravity because he was killed by none other than Wee Petit Huey. But in the show, A-Train became a superhero whom people could truly look up to, helping Starlight's resistance with his super speed and getting both civilians and his family to safety on his off time. Sure, he passed on the rescue mission initially when Annie approached him with the idea of breaking into the freedom camp where Huey, MM, and Frenchie were being held, but after he was confronted by the Deep, he knew that he couldn't run from his calling as a hero forever, and he showed up when it mattered most. A-Train's Quicksilver moment wasn't as flashy as the one from Days of Future Past, but we loved it anyways because everything he did in those few seconds saved a whole bunch of important lives. He saved MM from getting shot, tackled Huey out of the path of Homelander's laser eyes, and led the man in red, white, and blue on a wild goose chase, giving the boys the chance to escape. His last stand was pretty epic as well because even though he knew he was going to die, Reggie went out on his feet. He called Homelander what he'd always wanted to, a pathetic coward of a man who was nothing without his suit, and the fact that he laughed until the very end makes him one of the best redeemed characters in our opinion. In fact, the whole reason Homelander even caught up with him was because he refused to run through a civilian, which shows how much he's grown since the first episode of The Boys when he refused to show that mercy to Huey's original girlfriend. Hell, even Huey didn't feel happy about his death when Butcher asked him about it because he recognized that Reggie had changed before going out with a bang. And that makes Homelander's line about someone catching up with the A-Train feel that much lamer. We would have loved to see Jesse T. Usher as part of the series finale, but his character got the curtain call it deserved in a manner that's completely different from his original inspiration. The Soup Virus. The supe-killing virus, while an amazing concept and kind of an allegory for the COVID-19 pandemic, is also a show-exclusive creation because there's nothing like it in the comics. That's because in the comics, what Butcher planned to use to off all the soups was a modified version of Compound V and a radio frequency that would have given them all the Newman treatment. He was going to scale the Empire State Building like King Kong and blow every soup's head to Kingdom Come, but seeing as Kingsman already beat him to that montage, he obviously needed a different method to get at his mortal enemies. The soup virus is the perfect delivery system for his vengeance, and now that it's been weaponized to kill all the soups, including Homelander, it's become the deadliest weapon since the atomic bomb. Sure, the ending of Episode 2 kind of undermines that because it gave us a survivor in the form of Soldier Boy, but that also brings us to V1, which was also a show-exclusive creation. The difference between the biochemistry of V1 and V2 users being the factor upon which the virus's effectiveness is contingent is one of the best plot details from Season 5 so far, and it all happened because Eric Kripke decided to make The Boys a commentary piece instead of a standard Soup's Gone Wrong story. The end of Love Sausage. This brings us to our final difference between Season 5, Episode 1 and the comics, and that's the end of Love Sausage. We could have put the Homelander fight with the boys on this list, or Cindy, or the fact that Annie and Huey got into it in a big way, but some of those are minor additions, and others are exaggerations or reinterpretations of what actually happened in the comics. The end of Love Sausage is an actual difference because Love Sausage himself is a different character compared to his original counterpart. In the comics, Vasily was a true superhero. He was a Russian soup who fought alongside the boys to protect his country from a hostile Vought takeover, and he supplied them with weapons and ammunition for their missions on several occasions. He even struck up a friendship with Huey, and what did him in the end was his own sense of loyalty. Vasily made the mistake of thinking that Huey and Butcher were both his friends, when in reality, Butcher's just a murderous maniac. He's the one who kills Love Sausage, and he does it because Love Sausage figures out what he was about to use the knockoff version of V for. Side note, the head-popping version of V came from Russia, where Vought was about to use it in their coup attempt, but couldn't thanks to Billy Butcher. So, Vasily's story is integral to the final act of Garth Ennis' story. In the show, Love Sausage is reduced to being the object of MM's ire, and while it was satisfying to see Marvin choke him out with his own schlong, it was also kind of disappointing. We know they could have done a lot more with this character, but they chose not to because phallic jokes are still just funny in 2026 apparently. Still, we'd be lying if we said we weren't satisfied by his death because for all intents and purposes, Love Sausage was a total dick, pun intended. Homelander's mommy moment. This might have flown over your head when you were watching the opening sequence for Season 5, Episode 2, but when Oh Father is giving the eulogy for A-Train, something very interesting happens. We'll get to him in a moment, but for now, we need to focus on what his words and powers do to Homelander. Because yes, Homie is an unstable psychopath, we all know it, but we never thought we'd actually get to see him having a mommy moment. As Oh Father's speech builds to a crescendo about routing Starlight and her demonic cabal from the world, he starts using phrases that sound like a trigger for Homelander's Pavlovian conditioning. And when he uses his supersonic voice to close out his speech, Homelander actually hears someone telling him he'll be safe here. That person can only be his mother, and we say that because we never actually got to see his birth. So far, we've just been assuming that Barb and Vogelbaum's story about his origin is correct, that he did murder the runaway woman who carried his embryo for a couple grand by lasering his way out of her. But this little soundbite tells us there's more to his origin than we can dare imagine, and that mommy moment kind of confirms why Vogelbaum was so fixated on raising Ryan with a mother. Maybe it's because he knew that he took Homelander from his mother after his birth, and that's what caused all of his problems. Barb did say that Vought brought in the best psychologists in the world to develop the protocol that made him so needy for attention and love. What if they also suppressed his memories of his birth mother? Plus, that would explain why the casting credits for Season 5 list out Homie's full name. While everyone else knows him as Homelander, his real full name is John Gilman, and we suspect that he'll be meeting Mrs. Gilman at some point in the remaining 5 episodes. But even if he doesn't, Homelander's parental issues alone are an addition that the show made because it really wanted to set the character apart from his original comics counterpart. And kudos to the writing team because it clearly worked. Oh Father's inclusion. Well, Oh Father was going to show up at some point anyway, considering he's one of the last heroes Homie taps in the comics to lead his coup against the US government. The way he's been included in Season 5 is both seamless and nauseating. This literal child molester is being given the privilege of taking over Ezekiel's power base without any due process, and he's the husband of the current VP of the United States. We'll get to her in a few moments too, because honestly, there's a lot that can go wrong for her over the course of the final season, but Oh Father, being the televangelist voice for Homelander's regime, is the perfect choice in the most disturbing way possible. His speech in Episode 2's opening sequence was proof that he has some serious public speaking chops, and his history tells us he knows exactly how to use those chops to exploit people and their fears. In the comics, he's barely present for half a dozen chapters, and he dies an unceremonious death, leading the charge on the White House assault. We suspect he'll be doing that in the show too if he reaches the end of the season, but we'll also have so much more context about his character. Plus, we can't wait to see how his relationship with the vice president affects it all, because that's a subplot that has our full attention. Teenage Kicks versus the Boys. The fight between Teenage Kicks and the Boys is one that happened in the comics as well, but that's about the only thing that we can say about it being the same as the original. Everything else was so different that these two organizations might as well be completely different, because in the comics, Teenage Kicks led an attack on Butcher's team, but in the show it's the other way around. The show gave us the battle between Teenage Kicks and the Boys in the form of a dry run for the soup virus, and even the members of the former aren't the same as the comic book lineup. The only one the show retained was Jetstream, the guy who nearly turned Huey into a street splatter, but everyone else is different. Rockhard, She-Line, and Countess Crow feel like they belong in the Scorchers more than Teenage Kicks, and the fact that Butcher's dry run succeeds is a whole different ballgame altogether. In the comics, Teenage Kicks confronts the Boys for leaking sensitive information about them to the public. In the show, the Boys scouted them out as the best possible target to test the virus on, and nearly killed all of them except Countess Crow, whom MM allowed to escape. We think that will either come back to bite him in the butt or save the day by the end of the season, because they cast Maitreyi Ramakrishnan for the role, and she's too well known of a face to dispose of this quickly. But that shot of Jetstream and Rockhard convulsing and spewing up black goo, forming horrific blisters and eventually dying because of the soup virus, well, that was as original as it was traumatic. The fight between the Teenage Kicks and the Boys can't even be called a fight because it was a one-sided slaughter. And, while it might have been the same for the comics, it was nowhere as disconcerting as the TV show version. The entire Soldier Boy storyline. Speaking of disconcerting things, the fact that Soldier Boy's first instinct after being thawed out of his ice chamber was to ask Homelander if he screwed him is both hilarious and a glaring indictment of how poorly Garth Ennis used his character. Sure, comic book Soldier Boy was supposed to be the exact opposite of his inspiration, Captain America, and he was also the third person to play the Soldier Boy persona, but the fact that the two things he's remembered for is pissing his pants and getting his nose bitten off by Butcher tells us he was more expendable than anyone else. The show turned Soldier Boy into a main character by making him functionally immortal, Homelander's dad, Ryan's granddad, and Butcher's new mortal enemy. And this is a far more compelling take on the character by any measurable metric, and things are just getting started because Soldier Boy wasn't even unfrozen for an hour before he was being lied to and exploited by the son he tried to kill. Homelander sent him after Butcher, but left out the tiny detail about Butcher being in possession of a supe-killing virus, and that scene where he tells Sage that this was a tactical choice and not an emotional one is just gold any way you look at it. Plus, once he realizes that Soldier Boy's completely fine because he has V1 in his veins, it'll change the landscape of the rest of the season. So, Soldier Boy's entire existence in Amazon's The Boys has been a massive difference compared to what he was in the comics, and we haven't even mentioned all the things that happened in previous seasons because we'd legit be here all day if we got into that. Ash the Veep. The final massive difference from comic to screen is the fact that Victor Newman isn't the Vice President of the United States in the final stage of the story. It's Ashley Barrett, and that changes everything. We thought it was a bold choice to turn Vic the Veep into the cutthroat political mastermind that was Victoria Newman, but we always knew that for Homelander's coup to play out, he would need at least a few pawns in the White House. President Calhoun shines his shoes, sure, but when he steps out of line, who picks up the slack? When the promos for Season 5 came out, we thought Ashley was going to be the White House press secretary, but turns out Homie gave her the biggest promotion a girl with her skills could have asked for. He made her vice president. And that opens up a whole new can of worms because while Ashley isn't present in the comics, her current trajectory reminds us of one Jessica Bradley. Now, yes, the show has given that name and the ethnicity associated with it to Sister Sage, but it's given the actual storyline to Ashley because everything she's ever done as part of Vought has set her up as the perfect scapegoat. And if she thinks she got this promotion because she's a supe and she's excellent at her job, then she's wrong. In the comics, Jessica Bradley does everything right, survives Homelander's reign of terror, and is betrayed in the final act by her boss because he needed someone to take the fall for him. This leads to her tearing her own hair out, and that's something Ashley's been an expert at for several seasons now. Ash the Veep might have a Philosopher's Stone Voldemort situation going on right now, and she could even end up helping the good guys by the end, but that doesn't change the fact that her becoming vice president is a complete deviation from the comics, and even if she takes the dive that Jessica Bradley did, it's simply not going to end the same way. And we'd like to thank you for your patience because that's our list of the biggest differences between the first 2 episodes of The Boys Season 5 and the comics. Did you guys see something we missed or we could have included in this video to make it even better? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more content from the Boys verse. We'll see you guys real soon with yet another video, so until then, stay safe out there and have a marvelous day.